Madam Chair, you are live.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Affordable Housing Community Equity Development Commission on July 27th. And the first order of business is to call the roll. Karen Britton, Terry Bond,
Here.
Alicia Herrick Blaine,
Here.
and that's it for the time being. Patrick isn't coming and Rich is expected to join us. So the first order of business after the roll call is the approval of the June meeting minutes. I think everybody got them there. I did suggest that we might want to, and I don't know, Teresa, if this is possible but I would like to add the to the minutes themselves. If there's somewhere where we keep them as a repository, I'd like to add the memo that you sent us after our last meeting that had all of our ideas in a list for what we thought should be in the rental rehab program. It might be a good idea to have them attached to the minutes. Is there somewhere where we keep these things, some record of them, permanent?
Yeah, I thought I took care of that already.
Well, you might have, but I didn't know that yet. So, okay, good.
I can't, it doesn't happen until after you approve them.
I see. All right.
So
Okay.
once they're approved, then they go to, what's her name?
Kimberly?
Kimberly will take care of it.
Okay.
But
All
they have to
right.
be approved before they get.
I see. Okay. So then do I hear a motion to approve the minutes with the amendment of the list of provisions that we talked about at the last meeting for the rental rehab program? Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll
Is there
second.
a second? Okay. The approval having been moved and seconded, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. And being no nos, the minutes are approved as amended, I guess. Yeah, as amended. The next order of business is to hear from Eric Lashinsky on the draft comprehensive plan. Eric, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Nancy. Good to see you all again. You are probably one of the boards and commissions that I have met with the most, which is great. So some of this will not be new to you, but we're doing the rounds here in terms of presenting our draft comprehensive plan to as many different groups as possible of specific interests and missions. Let me share my screen here. Can you see the presentation?
No.
No.
You're sharing, Eric. It just hasn't loaded yet. There you go.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there you go. Change your tab. There you go.
Oh, now still loading.
No, there now.
It's there.
It says, okay.
I can see it.
Okay. Okay, good. We're looking at the cover of the draft comprehensive plan that we released on June 15th at the Planning Commission. Before I get into specifics about this plan, that are relevant to this commission, which is, primarily the housing chapter, as well as land use. I just want to go through a few frequently asked questions. This is kind of the boilerplate material we've been doing at all of our presentations, just to clarify, some basics about this comprehensive plan. So, first question in terms of frequently asked questions: how long is the draft Annapolis Ed 2040 document open for review? Well, it's 90 days. It started June 15th, so we're in the middle of that public comment period, technically going through September 14th, but realistically, it's going to end at the second Planning Commission meeting in September, which is September 22nd. So at each Planning Commission meeting throughout the summer, every 2 weeks, the next one is next Thursday, there's kind of open public hearing for this draft plan where folks can submit testimony online, present that live or just in written format at the Planning Commission. All the information about that is just at City of Annapolis website. There's a specific Planning Commission page. Will there be more chances to learn about Annapolis ahead? Well, we have this dedicated website that I'll talk about in a second. That's really where we're sharing a lot of information about this plan. It's very thorough. It's designed to be accessible for just about anybody who knows how to use, the internet. We're also providing printed copies of the plan at the local libraries and at the city council chambers at City Hall. So folks can see the printed copy there. You can send questions to Casey. I should have introduced myself and the team here. For the record, I'm Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning for the city in the Planning and Zoning Department. Casey Ortiz is here. He's a comprehensive planner in our department. And then Alad Nichols Kaufman is a summer intern from St. John's College, who's also been helping out. So Casey's receiving a lot of comments from folks on the plan and particularly around, events. And I'm getting emails as well. Either of us are good contacts. In terms of giving feedback, we've been getting a lot of comments directly through the website, AnnapolisAhead2040.com. We get emails forwarded to us by city council members and others. So we've been really capturing all the comments as they come in and putting them in a comment log. Are you planning to meet with any civic associations, HOAs, neighborhood groups, et cetera? Yeah, we are doing that all summer. We have a number of meetings already scheduled with different groups. So if anybody on this commission is involved with a particular neighborhood and has not heard of a specific meeting related to your group or neighborhood, reach out and we can have a dedicated meeting before the end of September. And so then what happens to the draft plan after the 90-day review period ends? Well, we're gathering all these comments into this comment log, it's kind of like a Excel sheet. We're going to respond to those, and then we're going to provide those to the Planning Commission, and they can pass on this draft plan to the City Council with a recommendation. And at that point, the recommendation would be please adopt or, adopt with recommendations. At that point, the City Council has to do an adoption process, and that's really up to them. So it's hard to say how long that might take or what shape it might take. So that should happen in September, October this fall. This is just a graphic view of what I was just talking about, where we're in this 90-day comment period right now. There's Planning Commission public hearings every 2 weeks. We're doing a lot of public outreach during that process. And then in late September, things would get handed over to the City Council for this adoption process. And hard to say when. Might have a adopted plan, but hopefully in the near future. Just wanted to share that this is an unusual process in some ways because it doesn't start with the City Council. It starts with the Planning Commission, and that's by design. It comes from the state land use code, which is quite specific about how a comprehensive plan should be produced and what the planning process should look like and how it should be adopted. And we do this every 10 years, more or less, in line with the census data that gets released. So that's also a requirement by the state. If you go to the AnnapolisAhead2040.com website, it first takes you to the city's web page, and this is where we've been documenting all of our process from the beginning over the last 3 years. You see this blue button that says review the draft plan. You click on that. and it takes you to a brand new website that's specific for this review period. Casey spent a lot of time putting this together. You can see this button to read Annapolis Ahead. You click on that to get a full document download, a PDF. If you scroll down, you can see some videos of some key topics from the plan. There's a few more we're going to be rolling out. Thank you to the TV studio, specifically Madeline Horrell, helped us a lot on these videos to kind of promote what's in the plan. And then it's hard to, I'm not going to show it to you at this point, but if you scroll down further, you'll see that we've broken out the plan into each chapter, and you can click on each chapter and get a specific comment link for that chapter, download just the PDF for that specific chapter. The very bottom of the website is an updated event calendar that we continue to update when new meetings get added. So this is your one-stop for anything related to the draft plan review process, AnnapolisAhead2040.com. So getting into the actual plan, table of contents is pretty straightforward. These three colored bars, the thriving city, the functional city, the adaptive city, those are kind of the structure of the plan. The chapters within those sections are pretty much required by the state, the exception of arts and culture. And then the implementation also has chapters that are required by the state. This chapter 13 recommended action matrix. If you don't want to print the whole 415 pages of this plan, I don't blame you, but this recommended action matrix chapter, it's really a good summary of all the goals and recommended actions in the plan. It'd be kind of a much shorter piece to print, and it lets you kind of read through by topic, every recommendation in the plan. And then the appendices cover all of the different planning studies that have been done along the way that kind of have informed the comprehensive plan, including task forces that were created by the city council that kind of unaffiliated with our process, but happened to focus on things that were important to the comp plan, like housing affordability. There was a task force focused on that, and we wanted to include references to all of these guiding documents. So there's links to all of these on the website. If you scroll down to the appendices tab, you'll find hyperlinks to these documents. I just want to briefly talk about the first chapter is our overview of the plan. It's not an executive summary, but it gives you a great rundown of how the plan is organized and what the underlying ideas are for this plan. First page, equity, health, and resilience are these foundational themes in the plan. Every goal and recommended action and performance measure has to reinforce these themes. Many of our goals reinforce all three of these themes, some maybe only a couple, but they're really themes of our moment in Annapolis. I don't need to go into the details, but we describe each one in length. And we have images throughout this document that are also of the moment, capturing Annapolis over the last couple of years to give a sense of who we are as a city. This is the Juneteenth parade, first annual 2 years ago, going up Main Street. Let's see. So we have information about how to use the plan. We're really trying to make this plan accessible to just about anybody. It's not just for staff or elected officials or other decision makers. It's for community members, boards and commissions. And so we provide some guidance on how to use it. The plan process is really just clarifying how we got to this point. And COVID had a pretty big impact on that, but we got through it. We pivoted along the way, and that was most felt through our community participation efforts, which changed dramatically during COVID, a lot more virtual meetings and targeted outreach, but happy to be back to in-person meetings. We've done 4 of those in the last 2 weeks. around the city and reach really diverse body of residents. We're going to do a couple more in September for anybody else who wasn't able to make it out to one of those. So we're looking at 2 more at the Pip Moyer Rec Center. One is going to be on, we haven't set the dates yet, but we're looking at Wednesday, September 6th, I believe, and then Saturday, September 9th in the afternoon. So a couple more in-person meetings, but it would not be an overstatement to say we reached a broad cross-section of people in the city from virtually every neighborhood as part of this process somehow. And then for chapter 2, demographic trends, the only thing I want to mention is clearly COVID shined a light on a lot of inequities in the city. Different communities and individuals had harder time adapting and coping with COVID. A lot of lessons learned, and we carried some of those lessons through to our analysis of social vulnerability, which is a foundational component of this plan. It's essentially looking at the data that can help us understand where social vulnerability exists in the city, meaning communities that will have a harder time responding to social, environmental, economic challenges. Many of these cases, these are communities that have been historically underinvested. And anecdotally, I mean, I think a lot of longtime residents can point to where these places are, but this data, which comes from a framework that the Centers for Disease Control provides, it's called the Social Vulnerability Matrix. It gives us a baseline. So the darker areas are where the data points to more socially vulnerable communities. You can see the Clay Street community around College Creek here is the most vulnerable, and then this crescent type form along Forest Drive picks up a number of other neighborhoods.
Hey,
So you
Eric.
see, yeah.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt. You said the index of social vulnerability is informed by the social vulnerability matrix. Where was that matrix again? You mentioned it. I just didn't capture it.
It comes from the Centers for Disease Control, CDC, and they've done this. They've done a mapping of this all over the country, so you can kind of see where it lines. We just did it specifically for Annapolis based on census tract, but
That's helpful. Thank you.
yeah, so that's actually what's defining these sort of shapes. Just that's something I should have clarified too.
No, that was, thank you.
You'll see that data throughout the plan as kind of a base layer on a lot of our maps, whether it's public transit, parks and open space, water access. There's a few other examples, but thinking about how we invest in communities, that kind of information can help us be more equitable. That's a big theme in this plan. So housing shows up in this first section of the plan under Thriving City. I'm going to talk about a few things from the municipal growth and land use before I get into housing. But, first off, you're going to see references in many chapters of this plan to the kind of development and growth that we want to see over the next 20 years in Annapolis is primarily this kind of development. This is a infill redevelopment along Annapolis Street in West Annapolis, fits seamlessly into the neighborhood, has a restaurant on the ground floor with apartments above. It's admittedly not a place where we have affordable housing or housing that can meet the needs of our middle income populations or low income populations. But this kind of development is really our only option for meeting housing goals. Where just because we don't have a lot of undeveloped area in the city, so we have to think about how to develop smarter and more efficiently and use our land base to meet our strategic goals. So we have in this municipal growth chapter, we also have population projections and forecast for where we want to be as a, in terms of population size. And I mean, the basic takeaway is that we're not going to be growing very fast. We're continuing pretty much, we anticipate, along the same growth pattern. We get occasional comments from folks about, why do we have to grow at all? Why, what's and the basic point is that we're going to grow regardless of whether people move to the city or not. There's natural family growth. Parts of families choose to move back to the city or try to, but can't. There are people who are going to move for jobs, and we can be more strategic and deliberate about who moves to Annapolis and who can live here. And that's kind of a big takeaway about how we develop has a significant impact on who gets to live in Annapolis and who doesn't, just to be blunt. So there will be people moving to Annapolis. We just don't know who, and a lot of that relies on the kind of housing we have here. We have a signature, I would say, probably the most important map in the plan is this future land use map. It's a pretty typical type of map for all comprehensive plans anywhere. And it really just use of property in the city. So the categories are somewhat consistent with the last comprehensive plan, with a few exceptions. The bright green are these environmental enhancement areas. These are places that were generally off the map in the past. They're embedded in other land use categories. We've brought them out so you can see the context, and they add value to properties, no question. Many of these are not developable, but it's important to see the connections that might exist. And then I think of more relevance to housing are these red areas, which represent mixed use parcels. And when you look at those in isolation, they're mostly situated along our major arterial corridors: Forest Drive, West Street, Bay Ridge Avenue, Chinkopin, Old Solomons, Island Road. And there was some mixed use in the last comprehensive plan's future land use map. That was in 2009. What we did is we took essentially all properties that were previously designated as commercial or office use and put those into a mixed use category. And the big caveat here is that there's no one size fits all for mixed use. It's a very broad category. It definitely needs more definition, but it implies that at each of these sites, there's an opportunity to provide a bit more flexibility in what happens at the site, and how that site can better respond to neighborhood and citywide needs. So the bottom line is that where we can build more housing in the city is going to be on these properties for the most part. These are places that could support both commercial and housing, or just housing. And that's really something that we want to convey in this plan. So we spent a lot of time talking about mixed use, what that means, and setting some standards, as you can see here, for what a great mixed use project would include. And this is really intended for folks like, I would say, the Planning Commission has to review a lot of new major developments. We wanted to give them some standards to look at, to guide development and give them a baseline to review new projects. And so you see things like connected street networks, compact and connected development, enhanced neighborhood character, commercial and institutional uses balanced with community needs, green infrastructure, enhanced public realm. This is something that could be used by communities and property owners and really anybody who's looking at redevelopment. We put a big emphasis on what it means to to develop an infill property. Infill redevelopment is essentially, as you all know, taking a previously developed property and doing something else with it. And it's been interesting to hear in a lot of our meetings, infill is not a household term. Although we tried to make this plan pretty accessible, there continue to be a few terms that people stumble on. And so this is one of them, but we do have a glossary in the beginning of the plan. So I think every word that somebody might stumble on is probably in there. But what we try to do in this page is clarify what makes for a good infill site, and then this former Public Works site on Spa Road is probably a perfect one. Now, there's a lot of things we don't know about these sites on both sides of Spa Road in terms of past contamination, and we're not going to be doing anything with these sites until we have a better understanding of that. But from an urban development perspective, these would make sense as something else, potentially housing or some mixed use, if they can be clean and ready for some development in the future. We do identify about a dozen large infill sites that we anticipate will transition in the next 10 to 20 years. We want to get a jump start on providing some guidance for what should be considered at these sites. And so we have bullet points for each of these sites. And pretty much all would be appropriate for some level of housing, mixed income housing. Some of these sites may not transition to anything in the next 20 years. There's no incentive right now for the owner to do anything, but we hope that maybe by highlighting them, we could start to get the ball rolling. Zoning is, as you know, primary guide for what will ultimately happen in the city. And we could take our future land use map and be as clear as we want to be on that, but it doesn't have the same type of teeth as the zoning districts, zoning guidance in our city land use code. So ultimately, the goal is to marry our zoning map with our future land use map and take what is today this very confusing and fragmented map of zoning districts and have it actually convey some sort of larger goal for what kind of development we want to see in the city, where it should be located. And I mean, personally, I would like to see a zoning map that just about anybody can make sense of. It's really remarkable how few people look at our zoning map and really can't begin to make sense of it. And it just kind of speaks to a lot of these piecemeal changes that have happened over time that have kind of broken it up. But we're looking at form-based zoning as a primary way of doing that. And this page is actually taken from the development regulations chapter, which is chapter 11 in the plan. You can see the difference in zoning types that exist today. And we did an example of this in the West Annapolis area. I'm gonna move through this a little bit. I spent a little bit too much time on land use, seeing the time here. I just want to emphasize in our housing chapter that we go into very fine detail about the issues that we're grappling with in the city. And, I know from conversations we've had with various groups, that you've been a part of, there's a lot of lack of understanding about this kind of spectrum of housing types that we need to really accommodate all residents in the city. And so this graphic here in the upper right is one effort to change that. There's a lot of descriptive text in this chapter aimed at clarifying the various housing options that we should have in the city. We do an assessment of what the primary housing types are today. challenging to kind of break it down into just a few groups, but this is our best effort. Excuse me? Okay. We took a lot of information from the plan that Teresa does every 5 years. It's called the Consolidated Housing Plan, and it pulls together a ton of data on existing housing stock in the city. So we didn't reinvent the wheel on that. Again, zoning, major both guide and impediment to what gets built in the city. We have a section here on fair housing. This is actually a requirement from the state with all new comprehensive plans. We are required to basically do the assessment of how the city is or isn't meeting the Fair Housing Act. And Teresa has been part of those studies in the past. So we have a study on the record from 2020 that looks at how the city is not meeting the intent of fair housing. And we have a statement here for that. So I'd say a lot of the recommendations are aimed at getting us back in compliance there. We looked at every residential zone in the city to look at exactly what can get built in these residential zones and what can't, and what are some of the standards in each zone that really determine what can get built. And what it kind of comes down to is this map on the right, I think is a important map. It shows all of the residential zoned areas in the city and commercial zones. So yellow is residential, red is commercial. These are all areas where you cannot build a duplex in the city. It's somewhat shocking, actually, given how many existing duplexes you might find in some of these areas that could not be built today based on existing zoning. This missing middle housing graphic is something you'll recognize. Really emphasizes the sort of housing options that we want to emphasize in our zoning. And these images are all from Annapolis today, missing middle housing options that exist throughout the city, that most of which could not be built under current zoning. We go into detail about the housing supply, what's getting built today and what isn't. You've probably also seen this map on the right, which shows in yellow just how many single family home permits are in the system today over the last 10 years. Orange dots are multifamily, and you can see they're primarily clustered at our public housing redevelopments. So this was the Oberry Court project here, and this is the Wilbourn Estates, formerly Newtown 20. There's a few scattered multifamily in here, but it's primarily single family homes, and nothing new for this group. But City Council asked us through a resolution that was passed a few months ago. They asked us to look at what was happening outside of the city in the county. There is, I would say, a pernicious belief that a lot of our housing affordability issues could be addressed simply outside of the city in the county. And I think this data, this map is really aimed at kind of clarifying that that's not really the case. And you can see the orange dots or brown dots are all the single family permits over the last 10 years. There's some few scattered dots in the parole area for multifamily and townhouse communities and Arnold. But there's no income restricted housing being permitted at this point in the county. It's important to acknowledge. There is multifamily. I think there will be more multifamily coming in the parole area, which it might affect some of the affordability, but there is no income restricted housing being built. So that's important to acknowledge. We also provide a range of data on housing need indicators, and a lot of this also comes from the consolidated housing plan that Teresa puts together. Finally, we have a couple pages about the Eastport Choice Neighborhood Initiative project that would redevelop Eastport Terrace and Harbor House, our largest public housing communities, and give some background on why this is needed and the opportunity here. The plan supports this project 100%. And I personally have been very involved, as have many city staff, Teresa and others, in this project and trying to make sure we keep the momentum on this moving and it can yield a really productive outcome. Finally, it may seem a little odd to include short-term rentals in our housing chapter. Sort of debated where to best situate this, but given the impact that short-term rentals have on housing cost and supply, it seemed important to acknowledge that there are a number of short-term rentals in the city. This map on the right shows where they're concentrated, in the downtown Eastport areas, Inner West Street. But the plan makes a few recommendations about short-term rentals. It's challenging to look at them only in terms of housing. I mean, they are an economic development strategy. They do benefit homeowners and provide income to folks. They're meeting a tourism need, clearly. But from a housing perspective, we do want to emphasize the importance of prioritizing short-term rentals that are being managed by owner-occupied housing versus speculative investors who might acquire a home with the intention to dedicate it exclusively to short-term rentals rather than long-term rental. And I think our code related to short-term rentals needs some improvement in that area. So that's the primary emphasis. I think by giving it that emphasis, we would not only be able to meet more housing needs, but also improve neighborhood conditions and have more long-term residents in those neighborhoods. So that's primarily the presentation. I think this is just showing you what the recommended action matrix looks like. If you were to check this out and download, this is just a sample page. It's just a summary of all the goals and the recommended actions with each goal. And then we have some more information about priority and cost and who's responsible, et cetera. But I know we only have about 15 minutes left, but I'm happy to take questions and, try to get back to you if I don't have an answer.
Thanks, Eric. On one of the things that you mentioned was there was a map that you showed where I think the point that you were making were in yellow. There were places where duplexes can't be built on.
Yeah.
Did I capture that right?
Yep.
Page was that on in the plan?
You can't build anything
right
more than a duplex. Sorry, I'll get back to it. So I would just qualify. You can build an ADU on all of these. That's in our code today. Every residential property by right can do an ADU. The difference is that, I don't know if this is what you're getting at, Elijah, but with the duplex, you have an opportunity for home ownership. You can have two equal housing units, whereas with the ADU, one has to be subordinate to the other. So it's only going to ever be a rental property that's managed by the primary residence. I just wanted to clarify that. But
that's a helpful clarification. Thank you.
Sure.
I had a question about the shopping centers that you had in there, like Hillsmere and Clock Tower. Is that something that's in the works to rehab those shopping centers?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I do want to qualify this quite a bit. I think, it can be frustrating for folks who are looking at housing opportunities to look at some of these shopping centers and say, oh, there's like a ton of underutilized parking. There may be some vacancy, or, just some of these shopping centers might seem a little dated, but, they're very profitable. and there's generally not a lot of incentive by their owners to transition to something else. And it's not easy to develop anything in Annapolis, frankly. And so I think to kind of take on the redevelopment of one of these major sites is a mammoth undertaking, and it's just not a lot of incentive. But I think we just wanted to acknowledge that these are places that are sort of ripe for some new use, might continue some of the existing uses. I mean, I think a place that has a grocery store would continue to have a grocery store in whatever future use, but certainly opportunities for new housing. And some of these sites, we do know of developer interest, and so we wanted to get ahead of that a little bit without getting too deep into the details of not trying to design these sites at this level, but there's definitely things to consider with each of them.
Gotcha. Thank you.
The clock tower had, if the former owner were there, he would not be considering changing it. But but since it was sold 4 or 5 years ago, 5 years, 6 years, I have no idea what the new owner is doing. But I can tell you that the former owner who developed it would be kind of surprised to see that it's on a list of properties to redevelop.
Yeah, I mean, some of these, there's some activity there today that suggests nothing's really going to happen anytime soon. But it's a significant difference from the last comprehensive plan, where if you look at that one, when it comes to channeling development, there were these 4 opportunity areas where the idea was we wanted to channel new development. And I would say the outcomes were really mixed. There wasn't any kind of change in our code to incentivize development in those areas. So it's not like it was very predictable. But the difference in this plan is that we see opportunities for sensible, more efficient redevelopment pretty much all over the city. And these sites are kind of an example of that. It's not as if we want to put all the new development in any one part of the city. We think there are places throughout the city where if some new development came in, there's an opportunity to meet a whole bunch of different needs, not just housing, but from an environmental perspective, a lot of these sites are just not really up to the current standard for environmental treatment. So, I mean, that's just another thing that when we get a new development, we get a lot of new benefits that may not be there today. But this site, this is Robinwood, and right across the street you have, the recently vacated Annapolis Seafood Market. There's a couple other properties across Tyler Avenue that are also vacant. So, I mean, that's another thing. There's some synergies here that we want to identify that might be an opportunity. But
Eric, you mentioned that there was kind of a lot of thought or expectation that the city's affordability issues ought be perhaps addressed better by the county and the surrounding areas. I'm wondering if there have been any conversations with the county's planning office and zoning around any potential zoning changes in a, for example, 15-mile radius of the county that's adjacent, to try and make improvements that would allow for higher density.
Yeah, there have been, actually. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, actually, we work pretty closely with the county, and so it's a little bit different, I think, depending on what part of our office you're talking to, because Teresa might work with their Arundel Community Development, which does more of the low income housing, and there may not be, I can't really speak to what's happening in that area, but in terms of finding ways to incentivize or encourage the missing middle housing, or housing that's affordable for that 80 to 120%. There's a lot of interest right now, and I just learned this morning of some efforts that a couple a county council member and some staff are working on towards that. So we're going to continue the conversation with them in hopes that they can do something, particularly in the parole area, that would unlock some more affordability. I think it's not that anybody's opposed to the Anne Arundel County doing more in this area, but historically they haven't, done a lot. So it's, we certainly, as a city, we need to act. And what I'm always reminding folks of is, even if Anne Arundel County is doing a lot more in the future, we're still going to be asking people to be driving from farther distances to work in Annapolis. And the goal should really be to enable people to live closer to where they work, for all the benefits that offers. But yeah, sorry, to answer your original question, I mean, there are some positive developments happening within our relations with county staff and elected officials. So
that's great. Thank you.
It seems as though in your housing chapter, it does mirror a lot of what we have talked about, certainly with the ill-fated housing bill that I guess we will try to resurrect next year. I hope the council will try to resurrect it next year. And I was pleased to see that you actually give our commission some kudos in your chapter, and I'm sure that Teresa appreciates that, as do I, on behalf of our commission. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I should have mentioned that early on, that it was very educational for me and other people at our department as well, to go through that process, as as discouraging as it may have been for us. I think that we learned some things from that process about how to talk about this issue, and I think we were reacting a lot. I think there's a lot of research in this chapter and other parts of this comprehensive plan that were aimed at, really, that kind of came out of that experience. And so, well, tried to, we had a lot of anecdotal and talking points about why we need some change to our zoning code to allow for more housing options for workforce households. But I don't know that we kind of came up with some of these maps and graphics and data points through that process. And this is a place where I think we're able to pull all of that. And so I do think that the case is persuasive here. I don't know if it would have been the same,
Well, I think for our next go round, having all this laid out in black and white and pretty colors as well, I think will be, for the council members who kept saying, well, we don't have any evidence, we don't have any studies, we don't have anything, we haven't done anything. There it is. And I think it's going to be really helpful to us.
Yeah. I think something that was eye-opening for me in particular, I haven't been here that long, but I think I had expectation that the legislation would get worked on and amended, and if it didn't start as something that was acceptable to all the council members, that it could get changed, and it didn't, it just kind of got shelved. And I think that, to me, suggested that I think coming back with something that's more specific and looking at some of the sensitivities, and maybe there's an incremental approach that could be used here.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I don't know that it's so much an incremental approach, but that there would be limitations on kind where there hadn't been in the previous iteration of the legislation.
Right.
Be much clearer from the get-go that we're not intending, this legislation is not intended to take over the world. So I think that would be really helpful. So I think this plan will be helpful. Oh, there's Rich. He's here. So I think that will be good.
Nancy, just to build on that, I think one of the things that I've been thinking about is, and Eric, I apologize if I've missed it in the plan, is, you know, I appreciate kind of the speaking to kind of the intent of what that workforce housing legislation was doing. But I wonder if this is also a place and an opportunity to highlight the need for there to be actions by the city council that are beyond zoning changes, to give credence to the fact that there may be a need to look at things such as Montgomery County just passed earlier this week around, you know, limiting rent increases, the amount of rent increases, and you know, the need for a rent rehab program and things of that nature, that, you know, really to use this document as a way to demonstrate the full complexity of the issue and not play into that notion that this is the one and only document, place, and staff that are, you know, responsible for making improvements to overall affordability.
It's a good comment. I would, we would really benefit from you just giving a read to the recommended actions. It's actually not a lot for this chapter. There's 4 goals, and each goal probably has half a dozen recommended actions. I think there may be some room in there for non-zoning related recommendations. We do have some, but you know, for example, like keeping better track of some of our naturally occurring affordable housing, but we don't necessarily have a great way to do that kind of thing yet. But yeah, I think anything that comes to your mind that's not in there, I mean, this is a good tie. Again, it won't take you very long, I think, to kind of look through what's in there right now, just in terms of the recommended actions. But
Thank you. I appreciate that suggestion.
as a commission in September, you could issue, you know, a few recommendations if you want.
Comments.
Yeah. Or you could do them individually. Yeah, either way is fine.
Well, that would mean you'd
There's
have to have an August meeting, so we can put that back.
That's
in.
true. Wait, no, because you would not be meeting till late September at this point.
Yeah, at the end of
Yeah,
September, the 4th,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be too late, so.
it's
So
tough.
if you
I think
want-
individual comments are probably going to be better, and this, you know, you're all knowledgeable about this stuff. We'll take anything that comes to your mind. Yeah. I probably do need to
Eric,
jump
that's a
off.
lot of work. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Any other
Yeah,
comments?
thank
and
you so
questions?
much.
Yeah,
Jerry.
it's really good, and we certainly do appreciate your spending some time with us to go over it.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to do that.
A good base
Yeah, but
document
Feel
for
free
all
to
of
be in
us.
touch.
All righty, thank you. Thank you so much,
Thank
Eric. I
you,
really
Eric.
appreciate
Thank
your.
you.
Sure. See you all.
Thank you.
I can't believe Miss Terry Bond didn't have 5 million questions.
I'll be quiet tonight, Teresa. I'm going to be a good girl.
I
That's
just
not
want,
the Terry we know. Mom.
She'll be
I
back
just-
next meeting. Don't worry.
Okay.
just to put this out, I'll give you a kind of an update on where we are with the rental rehabilitation program. It seems that things need to be fast tracked. So I put together a draft policies and procedures that I hope to finish up tomorrow. So you won't have that opportunity.
Program, Teresa?
Pardon?
For which program?
The rental rehab program.
Oh, now it has to be fast tracked?
Yeah. So So, um, what'll happen is that, that means you're not gonna have an opportunity to go back and go through all those bullet points
Right.
unless you have a meeting in, August. But if you want to individually send me stuff, that's fine. I've got a, the way it'll go is what I plan to do is send it to Dwan tomorrow, and then let him have at it. And then usually what happens is you have to have, the Rules Committee has to have a public hearing, and then it has to be posted for 30 days. So it sort of depends on how long it takes Alderman Gay to review it. I don't think it's going to HHW. They cancel their meeting. And they're not having a meeting in August, so.
The
if you
recommendations
guys-
that you sent us were contradictory. I mean.
Oh, I know.
don't-
Those were all the ideas, and
Right.
and
And-
so he'll get to, unless you have comments, he'll get to decide what goes in it at that point. I mean, it still has to go to public hearing, and it still has to have a 30-day review period, so.
So we're
And
not.
it still has to go to the Office of Law and
So
and everybody
it's,
else.
so what is it precisely that you are going to be sending him tomorrow?
The actual first draft of the policies and procedures.
Based on
Based on this list.
that list.
I have
So
all
you-
of those things. There's a section in it that I call, I can't remember what I call it, but there's a section in it. And I put all of those in there.
And the
And
contradictory
he's gonna have to go
ones?
through, unless you guys have comments. My guess is he'll get it tomorrow. Based on previous experience, I don't think I'm gonna have it back on Monday or Tuesday. So it'll probably be a while. So if you wanna individually send me stuff, or again, if you want to meet in August and go over what Dwan, after he's gone through it, it's up to you guys.
I
Yes,
would love
I will
that
have
because
it re-
it will be ready for September.
I'm sorry?
We meet informally rather than formally?
Yeah, I guess we could. This just sort of happened today.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
I
I
didn't
think
have
we
time
do
to
great.
think about, I didn't have the time to think about,
Okay.
but
Because when we talked earlier in the week, it was, we don't need to put it back on. Originally, we were going to talk about it at this meeting, but
right.
then you said it wasn't necessary because Dewan had canceled
Right,
HHW.
but now something
Yeah.
came up from the mayor's
Okay.
office and I need to, it
Ah,
needs to get
okay.
done, so.
Aha, okay. All right. So maybe it would be helpful if we had within the next couple of weeks, sometime in August.
Mhm. It's up
Just,
to you. I mean, I will be gone in August. I will be gone from the 17th through the 21st.
Okay. Maybe just before you leave.
Mhm. Yeah, I
We
mean,
could-
it's totally up to you guys what you want to do.
Okay.
If you,
I would think that if you could send us a copy of whatever it is you're sending to Dewan or to the mayor.
oh, it's not
Office.
going to the mayor.
Oh, okay, to Dewan. If you could send that to us,
Mhm.
maybe it would be a good idea for us to meet via Google or whatever.
Mhm.
Maybe by then I'll get my camera fixed or I'll
Mhm.
get my computer so that I can actually be seen.
Well, I'm just glad we can hear you.
Yeah, it isn't, I mean, that's
Yes,
pleasant.
yes.
It's my new laptop. It's very pretty. It just
But
still needs one more thing. I have to figure out how to get into it.
You
The
can
Geek
Google,
Squad-
you can Google that.
I know, I'm sure I can. The Geek
Yeah.
Squad they did a lot. They just didn't do this. So does that sound good for everybody? So that maybe, I'll find a good date and time. And then we can get Teresa, before Teresa goes,
Mm-hmm.
on vacation.
Yeah, because there's a lot I'd like to ask since I missed that last meeting. Like, where's the funding come from for the rental rehab program? And
Oh, it was passed in the budget.
It was passed in the budget, yeah.
Yeah,
how much is there?
500,000.
$500,000. So it's a lot of money.
That's great. Oh, here Marie wants to say hi.
Oh, there
sorry.
she is. There's Missy.
And of
There's
course
the
she's
troublemaker. She's
Very
beautiful.
pretty.
Mhm.
bad cat. Okay, well that's great stuff.
Is
Okay.
there a dog somewhere who's growling?
No, that's my cat.
Oh,
She's mad because I won't let her walk across the keyboard.
I see. Okay.
We know who's in charge in that family.
Seriously, she just knocked everything over. Okay, sorry. All right. Well, that's a lot of money. That's awesome.
Okay, so I'll try to find a date.
Okay.
Does that work for everybody? Terry, Rich, and I'll let Patrick know as well. And Elijah's still there, right? Yeah, you're still there.
I'm still here. That works.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, some
Okay.
of the stuff I borrowed from Lynchburg. They had some good stuff in it, and so like I said, I actually finished the first draft today, and I'll be cleaning it up tomorrow.
Okay.
So
Well,
when I
you're
send
ready
it
to
to when I
share.
send it to Dwan, I'll send it to you guys. I don't think there should be a problem with that.
Okay, all right. Because I think it would be good for us to give him some ideas for when he finally does get it rolling. But it's actually very good that the mayor's office wants to.
Yep, we
actually
got
get going.
people waiting.
Yeah, yeah,
We have people waiting, so we need to move it
Yeah.
out.
okay. Anything else that we have to talk about tonight?
Well, I will also be writing the annual plan, the annual report to HUD. So you'll be
Okay.
getting that, probably, there's a 30-day comment period. So you'll probably be getting that sometime at the end of August.
Okay,
And that basically
Alright.
just goes over everything that we've done in the past fiscal year.
okay. Anything else?
Not for me. Good to get back into it.
Okie dokie.
Right.
Thank you very much. Motion
If
to
there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
A second.
There's a second. All
Mhm.
those in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Meeting